Welcome to the show, my friends. This is another edition of Wellness Talk, and I am George Batista, your host and your steadfast wellness advocate. Hope you guys are doing great. And it's always a pleasure and an honor to bring this information to you. So, what's today's discussion? Today, we're going to talk about longevity. And specifically, can we do things on the cellular level to actually increase our chances of living a long, healthy life? Right? We talk about, of course, all the general things that you need to do, right? You know, whether it's taking supplements, eating a really good diet, exercising, de-stressing, no smoking, reducing your weight, all that type of stuff. Yeah, that's all great, and you have to do that, right? But when you do these things, how does it affect you on the cellular level? That's what we're gonna drill down to today. So we're gonna go deeper. We're gonna take a deeper dive today into longevity, and it's going to be we're going to reference two pieces today, both from Wellness Resources. The first one is protect your telomeres for mental sharpness and longevity. For those of you who don't know what telomeres are, they're the little caps at the end of your chromosomes, and they shorten as you age. And many say that they're a predictor of actually how long you're going to live and your cells dividing and that type of thing. But can we affect those telomeres? I've talked about telomeres before on this program, but it does bear repeating for those of you who are brand new to this show. So we're going to talk about telomeres, what affects your telomeres, and what affects them negatively, right? The stressors that we're dealing with in everyday life, all the things that add on to the stress burden of your body. And then we're going to talk about what are the things that we can do to keep our telomeres from shortening too quickly, right? So we're going to talk about all those pieces as well. So we're really going to dive into that. And then on top of that, we've got another article here, again, from Wellness Resources. This is Longevity Nutrients, How Sirtuins Support Healthy Aging. So now we're going to go from telomeres to sirtuins. What are sirtuins? Sirtuins are longevity compounds in your body that get activated, again, by lifestyle. And these things can help you live a long, healthy life. So again, we're going to talk about sirtuins, what they are, what stresses them out, what can affect them negatively, and then obviously, conversely, what can affect them positively. What can we do on our end to activate these sirtuins? And it's going to be a combination of obviously lifestyle, diet, and supplementation, and everything else that we can do as well. So again, two big longevity pieces: telomeres, sirtuins, all the biological processes that help you live a longer life. And then we're going to also discuss a little bit of the difference between your lifespan versus your health span. What is the difference? Which one would you rather focus on? So that's going to be our main discussion today. Longevity is a great discussion. Of course, we try to talk about that on this show as much as possible. And then from there, we've got Dr. Jeff Crippen back. He is our medical contributor, and he's going to discuss fish oil. Now, not just fish oil. He's going to discuss something that your doctors warned you about, or even your surgeons will warn you about if you're having surgery. What is it that they tell you? They tell you don't take fish oil, or many other supplements, by the way, but they'll tell you don't take fish oil prior to surgery. Why? Because, of course, in their eyes, at the risk of bleeding and complications and things like that. But the question that Dr. Crippen is going to answer for us today is that true? Is that actually true? What we've been told for many, many years in terms of supplements, especially fish oil and surgery. We know that fish oil is a little bit of a blood thinner. That's true. But how does it affect surgery? So Dr. Crippen is going to talk about that. He's got great studies on this. And I think you will come away from this with a brand new perspective on this. So definitely check that out. So that's what's happening today. We've got a lot of great information for you. Of course, go to georgebatista.com. Make sure you check out everything that we've got on the website. Of course, we've got all the articles, we've got all the videos, we've got audio. You can remember, you can actually go to the website and you can listen to the show, or you can watch the show. So you got both things you can do there. And at the same time, you can follow along by checking out all the articles that are on there. And of course, like, share, and subscribe. That's what we always ask you to do. It's much appreciated if you can do that, because this is how we grow the show, right? And, pass this on to your friends and family, because it really, really does help. And again, this show is growing by leaps and bounds every single week. We're seeing the numbers go up and up and up. And I appreciate all you guys who are helping us out and helping to do that. And by the way, I just want to remind you guys, of course, don't forget about the courses and the brand new course that I have. That is the ultimate guide on supplements. That's also on the website as well. If you go to courses, and you'll see it there. It's a 90-minute audio course. It'll teach you all about supplements. It teaches you exactly what to look for in terms of supplements, what to stay away from. And, just in general, it'll give you a little bit of a biology lesson in terms of how supplements affect your body, how the wrong ones affect your body, and how the right ones affect your body. Makes a big difference. And if you're a person who buys supplements on a regular basis, but you're concerned about how much money you're spending on them, and are they actually working versus being expensive urine, as they always say, well, check out that course, because you're going to get the best bang for your buck in terms of which, supplements, to buy, and again, what to look out for. So don't forget to check that out. It's the ultimate guide to supplements. That's my course, the 90-minute audio course. And again, you can check that out at georgebatista.com. All right, guys. So before we go any further, we want to give some love to the products that we feel are great on this show, and the products that I endorse. So let's talk about our friends at Wolf Mattresses. Optimizing your health in this day and age is hard work, and we all know that being healthy is made a little bit easier when you've had a good night's sleep. Since 1873, Wolf has provided generations of hard-working, big-dreaming Americans with high-quality, comfortable, and supportive mattresses and the restorative benefits of a good night's sleep. Wolf blends over 140 years of craftsmanship with modern innovation to create a premium foam hybrid American-made mattress designed for ultimate comfort and support. Experience unparalleled and restorative sleep with Wolf mattresses. Check them out at wolfsleep.georgebatista.com. Again, that's wolfsleep.georgebatista.com. Sleep better and live better with Wolf mattresses. Well, we all need a great mattress, right? Having a good mattress really is. I mean, when you're a person with back problems, you really don't understand what a mattress can do for you until you actually have a really, really good mattress, and it makes such a big difference. Of course, I have many back problems. So having a good mattress is a big deal, just so you guys know. All right. So let's get started on our longevity discussion today. And the first one is going to be, again, from Wellness Resources: protect your telomeres for mental sharpness and longevity. All right, so let's get into it. Before we get into it, again, I wanted to kind of just make sure you guys know the difference between lifespan and health span. So when you're having this discussion about longevity, right? People, this culture is obsessed with how many years you actually live, right? And this has been going on for a long, long time, right? You talk about somebody who lives into their 90s, and they're like, wow, that's great. They lived into their 90s, or they lived to 100 years old and stuff like that. I have people in my own family who are in their 90s, right? My in-laws are in their 90s. So you think about it, you say, wow, that's great. It's great to have people, in your life for so long. However, the bigger question is, yes, okay, they lived into their 90s, but what is their quality of life? That is the big deal. And that is where I depart from this a little bit, because I say lifespan is one thing. Now, lifespan refers to the actual total number of years that you're on this planet from birth to death, right? That's your lifespan. That's just, for whatever it is. But we also have what's called health span. And health span measures the years that you have lived on this earth free of disease and illness. Big difference. Because again, you have people that live into their 90s that are completely debilitated, that maybe they're in assisted living, maybe they need help walking around, maybe their children now are taking care of them. Sometimes they feel that they're a burden on their children and stuff like that. Well, do you want to live into your 90s and even 100 years old debilitated with all these problems, all these health issues? To me, I would say, what kind of life is that versus your health span, which is living the most amount of years on this planet free of disease, where you're actually able to be functional. You can do things on your own. You don't have to be dependent on somebody, your children or assisted living or anyone else. You can do things on your own. Now, I'm not saying that when you're in your 70s or your 80s, you're going to be lifting stuff like you were when you're 25. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you want to be functional to the point where, again, you can be independent. That is what I'm saying. And a lot of people confuse the two. Now, I've often said on the show, and I will still say on the show, I would rather have a long health span than lifespan. So in other words, I would rather live till 80, if that's how long I was going to live, and be free of disease, have a great quality of life, not have to be a burden on my kids, right? Just have a nice quality of life and kind of go out gracefully, versus being 90 or 100 or even more than that and be debilitated and not being able to walk and being in a wheelchair or, whatever the case may be. That's me. That's the way I look at it, right? So this is the reason why I do a lot of the things I do. I don't do it because I think I'm going to live to 100 years old. I may not. We all have an expiration date. We all don't know when that date's going to come. But the way I look at it is, while I am on this earth, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I have a good quality of life. That to me is important. So it's about putting the odds in my favor, which means that I'm doing all the things, right? Good food and good exercise and lowering stress and all that stuff, all the stuff that I do every single day, because I want to put the odds in my favor to have a good quality of life. So that's the way I think about it. So I just wanted to kind of give that perspective between lifespan and health span when we talk about aging and longevity. So with that said, let's talk about telomeres. Now, again, for those of you who don't know, telomeres are these caps at the end of your chromosomes in your DNA. And they basically, what they do is they protect your chromosomes from oxidative stress. The issue with telomeres is that as you age, they shorten. And the big comparison in terms of telomeres of what they would look like is the shoelace, right? We all know the shoelace that has that little plastic tip at the end of it. So that would be the telomere, and the actual shoelace is the chromosome. So the idea being that the tip of the shoelace shortens, and eventually when it gets really, really short to the point where you really don't have a shoelace anymore, that's pretty much the end, right? That's kind of the concept. Right? It's a little more complicated than that, but to kind of just make it simple, that's kind of how they frame it. So the issue with telomeres is that they are hypersensitive to stress, to oxidative stress. So each time the cells divide, telomeres lose 50 to 200 base pairs. Just like if you snip off a fraction of the what's called the aglet, that's what that little piece at the end of the shoelace is. That's if you snip off a part of the aglet of your shoelace. So it's kind of like every time you get oxidative stress, a lot of oxidative stress, you're snipping off a part of that aglet. That's kind of how the telomeres work. Okay. And then what ends up happening is when you really start to damage the telomeres, then cells can die. You get what's called apoptosis or cell death, things like that. So because telomeres are hypersensitive to oxidative stress, they require an antioxidant system to keep them healthy. Okay. Now, which comes in, right? An antioxidant system that comes in that does this is called the NRF2 antioxidant system. Now that stands for nuclear factor erythroid 2. It's hard to say, but it's basically NRF2. Okay. So what is the NRF2 pathway? The NRF2 pathway is a regulator. It's a pathway that is a regulator of your antioxidant system. It regulates and protects against high levels of inflammation like NF-kappa B, which again can, set off a whole bunch of oxidative stress on your telomeres. So NRF2 is there to kind of be the buffer against the oxidative stress to the telomeres. NRF2 plays a crucial role in the body's defense against stressors, like by activating genes that produce protective enzymes. NRF2 controls the level of several essential enzymes involved in the production of the master antioxidant glutathione. So glutathione is the biggest antioxidant we have in our body. That's really the main driver of antioxidant status, okay? If you have a decline in the NRF2 pathway, that can actually lead to a decline in the stores of glutathione, which becomes pro-inflammatory and can cause all kinds of damage, right? So this dysregulation is a major factor in telomere shortening. This is not what you want, okay? So you know, with the telomere shortening, by the way, you get mitochondrial dysfunction, you get cognitive decline, you get, you know, all different, you get basically the diseases of aging, right? So we want to try to reverse that. So some of the consequences of telomere shortening and NRF2 depletion, it increases your risk and susceptibility to neurodegenerative changes and disease. It can also lead to muscle loss, changes in heart, lung, kidney function, blood sugar dysregulation, bone loss, vision and hearing loss, and more. Okay, so those are just some of the consequences of the telomere shortening and the degradation of the NRF2 pathway. So, what can we do about it? Okay, well, what are the things externally that affect this, right? What are all the oxidation pathways that can affect this? Well, it's the lifestyle choices. It's the emotional stress. It's the lack of physical activity, right? Sedentary lifestyle, smoking, alcohol, right? Eating processed food, bad food, all that stuff can lead to oxidative stress. Psychological and emotional stress. If you go into a lot of psychological stress, that can lead to the shortening of telomeres as well. Environmental toxins, right? Cadmium, lead, mercury, methylmercury, arsenic, aluminum, all these heavy metals that are ubiquitous in society that we all come into contact with, whether it's through, you know, medications, or whether it's through just where we're working, or whether it's through, if we're, you know, we could be working in a place that has asbestos or lead or all that type of stuff. So all these things affect us, right? We have to do everything we can to kind of put the odds in our favor. Also, triclosan. A lot of people don't know what triclosan is. Triclosan is a compound found in many personal care products. I talked about it a couple of shows ago, and it's, you know, you find it in a lot of the, you know, again, personal care products, like the things that have aromas, let's say, like the air fresheners and the stuff that you put in to smell good. And it might be in deodorants and things like that. But it has been linked to different types of cancer, or including breast cancer. And it's also been shown to be highly toxic in terms of oxidative stress. And it can also shorten your telomeres. So with all that said, those are the things that can affect it, obviously. So we want to go on the other side of that, right? We want to make sure that we change that. So what are the factors that protect telomere length? So obviously it's the opposite, right? We want good weight loss, right? We want to maintain a good weight. We want to maintain a healthy diet. We want exercise, the big one, physical activity and exercise. That's essential for keeping your telomeres healthy. Good diet. Mediterranean diet has been shown in many studies to actually affect telomere length. Whole foods like vegetables and fruits, seeds, nuts, grains, high intake of polyphenol-rich foods, and also olive oil, and, you know, lowering saturated fats, maybe lowering of the carb, you know, of the simple sugars and stuff like that. You know, that type of diet is great. You want to stay away from the processed foods. That is one of the biggest offenders here. The, you know, omega-6 to omega-9 ratio, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But basically, you know, on the diet side, that's what you want to do. So let's talk about the nutrients that protect the NRF2 pathway and telomeres. So these are the key ones. And again, it's all cited in this article here. The omega-3s, right? This is DHA and EPA, or what you would call the fish oil, depending on if you're taking a, you know, fish oil tablet or something. So DHA and EPA are positively correlated with telomere length in children and adults. This is several human studies that are showing this. Lifelong DHA intake enhanced NRF2 function, profoundly attenuated telomere attrition. So it literally stopped the telomeres from shortening. Now, we know that omega-3s are required for your brain, your nervous system, your electrical activity, your cell membranes, right? Your cell signaling, all these types of things. But you have to remember that omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. They are anti-inflammatory modulators. So omega-3s, great to have. You need them. Make sure, eat some fish, some fatty fish each week. Try to get wild-caught salmon if you can. That is some of the best fish that's out there. Mackerel as well. And it doesn't have all that mercury and stuff like that, but wild-caught salmon is the best one. Then we want to get, again, this ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. That's the big one, right? So omega-6, we know, are the seed oils, right? Safflower oils and all these fatty oils that are ubiquitous in society. They're in all the frozen foods, all that type of stuff. So we want to lessen those seed oils, the saturated oils, the trans fats, all these things. Lessen those and bring up the omega-3s. The problem is, the way society eats today, Americans have a diet of a 20-to-1 ratio omega-6 to omega-3. Unfortunately, you literally have 20 times the omega-6 foods versus omega-3. What it really should be is 4-to-1, right? As close as possible. So we want to do everything we can to change that. So again, wild salmon, bluefin tuna, sardines, anchovies, lake trout, striped bass, all those things are great in terms of diet and fish. So make sure you get that. And then if you want to get a supplement, consider a good quality fish oil. Of course, we like the Wellness Resources brand here. That's the brand that I use. You could take a look at their daily DHA, their leptinol, and their DHA for kids if you want to supplement. Or let's say you don't like fish or you don't eat fish regularly, check out those. Next, vitamin D. Okay, the results of a large randomized clinical trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, July 2025, indicates that vitamin D is important for telomere length. The 5-year study showed 2,000 units of vitamin D per day reduced telomere shortening. 2,000 units. Right? I know people that take more than that. I actually take more than that. But 2,000 units is a good, I would say once 2,000 units in the winter is a good start, not only for your immune system, but now we're seeing here, it's great for your telomeres as well. Glutathione. We want to make sure that we have healthy glutathione levels as well, okay? Research shows that with age and high levels of oxidative stress, glutathione levels are depleted. So you want to restore those glutathione levels. Check out Wellness Resources Glutathione Ultra. It's an advanced form of glutathione with superior absorption and bioavailability. Next, sulforaphane and cruciferous vegetables. So sulforaphane is a compound that's in these cruciferous vegetables that is known for cancer protection, right? Broccoli sprouts have the highest and one of the richest sources of sulforaphane. And you could also find that in broccoli and cabbage and other cruciferous vegetables. These are anti-cancer compounds. So you want to be eating a lot of these things every single week, at least, maybe 2 or 3 times a week to get that cancer protection, help with telomere length. And then we've got phytonutrients. Okay. So we've got the herbs like turmeric. Turmeric is great. Green tea. We've got quercetin, resveratrol, all great for telomere length. We've got astaxanthin. That's another compound that is great. It's great for buffering against NF-kappa B, and it helps with squashing inflammation and helps the NRF2 pathway, and again helps with telomere length. And then at the end here we have great supplement options you can check out again from Wellness Resources: Turmeric Gold, Repair Plus, quercetin, phytosome plus lutein, and green tea extract and astaxanthin. So check out those supplements if you want to supplement, your diet in terms of telomere length. But those are great options for that. Go to myvitaminresource.com if you want to check out those from Wellness Resources. All right, so let's go to the next one. So continuing with our longevity discussion. So now we're going from telomeres to the longevity nutrients, how sirtuins support healthy aging. So again, from Wellness Resources. So let's talk about sirtuins and what they are. So sirtuins are anti-aging compounds that are major regulators of cellular physiology to maintain cellular homeostasis. So when we say homeostasis, what do we mean? We mean balance. Homeostasis, that's what it means. It means the balance in your body. Your body's always trying to get to homeostasis, a balance of where everything is in the right place, right? So if you have stuff that's way out of place, when you look at your blood work and you see things that are way out of place, for example, blood sugars through the roof or cholesterol's through the roof, all these things, you're not in homeostasis. Homeostasis is when your body's regulating everything and it's in the right proportions in the right places. And your body's always trying to get there. So we want to do everything we can to get there, okay? Now, sirtuins are involved with several critical cellular pathways, AMPK, P13K, and the mTOR, which regulate the anabolic and the catabolic. So basically, the regulation of how your body builds, which is the anabolic side of things, and the catabolic, which is how your body breaks down. And again, as you grow, right, when you're growing from young adulthood into adulthood, you've got a lot more anabolic stuff happening. You got a lot more repair and a lot faster building, right? But once you get to the older ages, you start to even out, and then you start to get more catabolic, right? You start to break down more. So of course you want to try to slow that process down. That's the whole thing about healthy aging. So anyway, sirtuins are intimately involved in this whole process. They're also involved in the secretion of inflammatory modulators and neuroimmune cells like dendritic cells. Now, what are dendritic cells? Dendritic cells are the cells that are presenting to T cells in your immune system. So what they do is they take a piece of the antigen or whatever pathogen that you're dealing with, and they present them to the T cells. Okay, those are dendritic cells. And basically then this way, an immune response can be activated. And then we have also the macrophages, which are also affected by sirtuins. Now, the macrophages come, and they're like little Pac-Mans. They eat up the pathogen. Okay, so you have the presenting cells, and then you have the cells that eat up like the little Pac-Mans. They eat these things. So sirtuins are involved in the modulating of all these things that go on in your immune system. Very, very important. They are very anti-inflammatory again. And they bring down inflammatory cytokines. This is what happens if you get really, really sick, for example. You may have heard of a cytokine storm. If you had COVID or if you had the flu or something like that, and you ended up in the hospital and, it got really, really bad, you sometimes get this cytokine storm. Well, the sirtuins actually help to modulate that as well, to actually bring that down. Now, there's many types of sirtuins, right? We've got pretty much about 7 sirtuins, but they're specific. Some of them do specific things. Sirtuin 1 is the one that is the most well studied. And what does it regulate? It regulates pancreatic insulin secretion. It regulates insulin sensitivity and glucose uptake and usage. That is important, right? Because metabolic health is the big thing. If your metabolism and or if your blood sugar basically, or your pancreas and all that is out of whack, you're going to be metabolically dysfunctional. You're really going to have a lot of problems. You're not going to have the metabolic flexibility that you need. So sirtuin 1 actually helps to regulate that. It also helps, to regulate kidneys, liver, retina, skeletal muscle, blood vessels, uterus, adipose tissue. I mean, pretty much everything. Then we have the other sirtuins, 2 through 7, and they're found in many other tissues as well. They're found in the nucleus and the nuclei and the cytoplasm and the mitochondria, right? The mitochondria is how your body makes energy. So if you don't have good sirtuins working in your mitochondria, low energy. So with that said, obviously we want a good balance. We want our sirtuins working. We want our sirtuins activating so we can have a better response to aging. That's the main thing. That's what we want. So what are the bioactive compounds or the foods that can help keep their sirtuins in good shape and help to activate them? So I'll run through this list pretty quickly. We have herbs like berberine. We have curcumin, fisetin, which is in strawberries, Lutein, right? You find that in celery, parsley, broccoli, onion leaves, carrots, peppers, all those things. Quercetin, again, you find that in onions, really high in onions, but you also find in cranberries, spinach, asparagus, kale, broccoli, cherries, blueberries. And again, it's a great anti-inflammatory. It's also great for allergies. Resveratrol, right? We know resveratrol is found in grapes. You find it in wine a lot, right? It's great, but it's also in grapefruits and apples and pears, strawberries, tomatoes, peanuts, cranberries, but in smaller amounts. Highest amounts are in like walnuts, tangerines, and of course grapes. And then we have the other foods like cabbage, cauliflower, beans, garlic, capers, green tea, olive oil, dark chocolate, and anything that's organically grown or hopefully grown yourself as possible. So all those things are great to activate the sirtuin response in your body. Now, you also want to have, again, the daily, or at least a few times a week, incorporate those good foods, including the fish, again, the wild-caught fish and things like that. Now let's take a look at supplements. So we have the food component. Now let's take a look at the supplements that help. So supplements from Wellness Resources is Berberine Ultra. That's a great one, right? It's a 550 milligram capsule of Berberine Ultra. It's 4 times better bioavailability than to normal berberine that you see in a lot of other places. We have their curcumin options, which turmeric gold is one. This is the one that I take every day. It's an advanced form of turmeric. It's 24 times more bioavailable than the standard turmeric that you see outside, right? Or in many other companies that offer that. It's fantastic, let me tell you. We have Repair Plus, which also has turmeric, quercetin, and bromelain. Then we have Brain Protector, which has R-alpha lipoic acid, fisetin, and optimized curcumin, and as well as wild blueberries. So those are great. Of course, we have quercetin as well, which I talked about. And then we have quercetin, phytosome plus lutein. Again, the bioavailability. And you're seeing a theme here with these supplements. One of the things about Wellness Resources that is just unbelievable. They focus on the bioavailability of these supplements. That's what sets them apart from most other supplement brands. They will not introduce a supplement to the marketplace and to their customers until they know it absolutely works and that it's absolutely bioavailable. That's one of the biggest things for them. And this is why I love Wellness Resources, and I will always recommend them. So again, quercetin, phytosome, and lutein. We have, you can check out Repair Plus again. And then we have fisetin, which contains 100 milligrams of branded extract of the flavonoid fisetin. Again, this is what you find in strawberries. It's great. Brain Protector, which has fisetin as well as lipoic acid and curcumin. Resveratrol, which is Resveratrol Ultra 500. And then some other notable mentions, Cardio Helper, which provides a blend of resveratrol, grapeseed extract, horse chestnut, and hawthorn berry. This is a great one if you really want to strengthen the cardiovascular system. Fantastic supplement, just the right proportions in it. And then ferrostilbene. This compound is the cousin of resveratrol, and it provides up to 4 times better absorption than resveratrol. And it's just a great sirtuin modulator. So again, everything that we've gone over is basically how you can modulate these sirtuins to activate them to basically get a better response to aging, to help you age gracefully. So now we've got 2 things. We've got the telomeres and everything you can do on the side to keep those telomeres as long as possible. And then we've got the sirtuins to keep them activated. Now, if you can do both, right? And really, there's a lot of cross talk there, right? Because if you do one, many times it's going to affect the other, right? So if you can do that, you can get those 2 things going, you're well on your way to aging gracefully. And that is the key, aging gracefully. That's what you really want to do. So make sure you check that out. Again, it's the telomere length, doing everything you can, and sirtuins, healthy aging. And remember, always look at health span. Try not to look at lifespan. Lifespan doesn't mean anything if you're debilitated, right? You really want to look at health span. How long will you live here free of disease? That's what you want to focus on. That's what real healthy aging is. So that's just my 2 cents on it. I hope that you walk away with some good information, help you with taking notes. And again, if you want to check out wellness resources supplements, go to myvitaminresource.com. And they have amazing specials. They have amazing supplements. They always have specials every month. So make sure you take advantage of that. I guarantee you will not go wrong with those supplements. I personally use them. I've been using them for 18 years. I've used them with clients. I've used them with friends and family. Never go wrong with them. Check them out, Wellness Resources. All right, guys, let's go to our next segment. We want to bring in Dr. Jeff Crippen to talk about fish oil and surgery. So without further ado, let's go to Dr. Jeff Crippen. Once again, we're back with Dr. Jeff Crippen. All right, Dr. Crippen, as always, we're excited to have you on today because you just throw out some gems, some amazing information, educating our listeners and viewers on just incredible nutritional information. And today, we're going to be tackling fish oil. I've talked about fish oil on this program many times, the essential fatty acid, but this is a specific one. We're going to talk about fish oil in surgery. So, Dr. Crippen, let's talk about it.
Awesome. So this is great. Thank you for having me back, George. Wonderful to be here once again with you and your audience. And the question is, should you take fish oils before surgery? Wow. Right? And connected to that, when should you stop fish oil before surgery? Because this is something, I'm a chiropractor, I'm a kind of a functional nutritionist. And what drives me nuts is some people go into surgery and they say, the doctor told me to stop fish oil 3 days before surgery. And other people say, my doctor told me to stop 7 days before surgery. And other people say, my doctor told me to stop fish oil 30 days before surgery. And my question is, did they also tell you to not eat McDonald's and get a double frappa mochaccino loaded with sugar and caramel sauce from Starbucks?
Exactly.
Right? So why are they stopping you from something that we know has tremendous health benefits, and yet not stopping us from eating trans fats, sugar, refined carbohydrates, chemical laden foods, right? So it never quite sit right. And then on top of that, there's the incredible variation. Is it 3 days? Is it 7 days? Is it 30 days? Is it 22.5 days? What's the right time to stop fish oil before surgery? So that's what I wanted to figure out. What is the answer? So just do a quickest recap because it's something you've covered before. Fish oil, two main ones are EPA and DHA. They're long-chain omega-3 fatty acids found in fish, shellfish, and some algae. They are essential nutrients that play important roles in various bodily functions, including cardiovascular health, brain health, and eye health. And why does this matter? About 8% of the population is taking fish oil, which is 19 million Americans, about 12% of Canadians as of 2015. And fish oil has many cardiovascular benefits, including lower blood pressure, lowering triglyceride levels, and improving endothelial vasodilator function, which is basically the endothelia, the inside of those blood vessels, which is very key to prevent atherosclerosis. So fish oil is common. It's beneficial for brain health. It's beneficial for cardiovascular health. It's beneficial for eye health. So should we take it or not before surgery? So, and just a little more background, meta-analysis suggests that omega-3 polyunsaturated fats significantly reduce cardiovascular disease, mortality, including myocardial infarction and sudden cardiac death. And there's some studies that show it can decrease sudden cardiac death between 39 and 90%. So this has an incredible benefit to us. Mm-hmm. But is it safe to take during surgery? Right? Anyway, we'll jump through this. But this is the Framingham Heart Study. Showed a 34% lower risk of total mortality when individuals had an omega-3 index above 6.8. Omega-3 index is, you've talked about that before on the show, George. Great. So that's the percentage of the membrane of your red blood cell that's made of omega-3 fats. Exactly. It's basically a marker for omega-3s in the tissue, and it's a marker of your omega-3 content, consumption, and utilization in the cells over the last 3 to 4 months. So 34% lower risk of mortality, 39% lower risk of cardiovascular events. That was in the Journal of Clinical Lipidology. This study that was in the Lancet in 1999 showed a 45% reduction in sudden cardiac death after 9 months from taking 1 gram a day of fish oil. This study showed, this is where the 90% number comes, a review of getting an omega-3 index up to 8 and above. And that's what we see in large population studies in countries like Japan. And it's up to a 90% reduction in the risk of sudden cardiac death, like heart attack, deadly heart attack or stroke, and lower levels of inflammation. And then a meta-analysis from the Netherlands Heart Journal showed it significantly reduced major coronary events, cardiac deaths, and sudden deaths. So, and the cool thing is that next line, effect size stronger in those with lower baseline omega-3 status. So the lower you were to begin with, the more you improve by adding it. Wow. So that's why it matters. So why is this possibly bad around surgery? So what's the problem? So there's this thing called a theoretical concern, which means it's never been proven, but they think it could happen. A theoretical concern that the omega-3s may compete with something called arachidonic acid in the platelets and lead the platelets to be less likely to clot. So the authors of this study, which was in the journal Circulation and Cardiovascular Quality Outcomes in 2018, these authors write, yet little or no objective clinical evidence supports this practice. The risk remains largely theoretical because prior clinical trials have not reported significant increased risk of bleeding with fish oil supplementation. So this whole idea that fish oil increased our risk of bleeding and should be stopped before surgery is based on theory. It's based on nothing hard. That's what the authors of this study wrote in 2018. And they reiterate it later in the article. Yet these recommendations based on theoretical and mechanistic concerns have not been supported by empirical evaluations of bleeding risk in clinical practice. What does that mean? It's somebody thought it could happen, and they have no evidence of it happening.
Wow.
So there's a couple studies that have showed increased risk of clinical bleeding. There's not many of them. Clark reported an increased risk of epistaxis, which is nosebleeds, in children treated for hypocholesterolemia, but this finding could not be reproduced. So somebody found it, nobody else could replicate it. Yokoyama reported a higher rate of minor bleeding with EPA, which is one of those omega-3 fats, versus andastatin versus statin alone. Yet other large trials of fish oil patients with hypercholesterolemia at a high risk of cardiovascular risk have not reported increased bleeding risk. So Clark had a study unconfirmed. Yokoyama, a study that was unconfirmed, and fewer trials up to several hundred patients each have evaluated bleeding risk with fish oil and have found no significant risk. So two studies say we found something. Other authors have tried to reproduce it, couldn't find it, and generally trials have found no increased risk. So let's dive a little deeper. So these people, what were the results of this study? This was that journal Circulation, Cardiovascular Quality and Outcomes. And this is a journal, I believe, of the American Heart Association. Yes, this is a journal of the American Heart Association, and this was published in 2018. So why has this not shown up in your doctor's office yet? Risk of bleeding was not higher in the fish oil group. And here's the kicker. Not only did the risk of bleeding not go up, total units of blood transfused were significantly lower in the fish oil group compared to the placebo. What does that mean? You were less likely to need a transfusion if you took fish oil. And if you didn't need a transfusion, you needed less units of blood if you took in the fish oil group compared to the placebo group. All of that to say you're less likely to bleed. And when you do bleed, you're going to bleed less than when you don't.
Incredible.
Conclusions. They even go further. Higher achieved levels of, basically that's a sign of omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids. But just think higher level of omega-3s were associated with lower risk of bleeding. More omega-3s, lower risk of bleeding, which is the exact opposite of this theoretical concern. And here's the kicker, even another kicker. These novel findings, novel meaning new, hey, for the first time, check this out, support the need for the reconsideration of current recommendations to stop fish oil or delay procedures before cardiac surgery. These say, hey, we need to rethink what we're doing because the evidence doesn't support it.
Wow.
And here's the key thing. These patients took 1 gram of a fish oil, had EPA and DHA. They had a loading dose of 10 grams for 3 to 5 days or 8 grams for 2 days, including 2 grams on the morning of surgery. These people were rolling them into, what time is surgery typily done? Early,
yes.
These people you're waking up at 5, you're waking up at 4, you're waking up at 6, you're in the operating room by 7:30, 8. These people were taking 2 grams between waking up and rolling into surgery, and they still saw lower risk of blood. So not just did they take it, they were taking it the morning as they were rolling in. discussion. We showed fish oil supplementation did not lead to an increased perioperative bleeding, that's bleeding during the time of operation, across multiple commonly using bleeding definitions. So they used a whole bunch of criteria. On the contrary, patients randomized to fish oil required fewer units of blood transfusion compared with placebo. Results were similar across multiple patient subgroups. And actually, if I remember this study right, they looked at 3 different surgical centers in different continents. And what they found is no matter what country you were in, it was the same thing, with none showing higher bleeding risk after fish oil supplementation. So this, anyway, that goes into a little bit of a history, which we may jump. Here's one more, omega-3s and after in surgery. This is with radical prostatectomy, which is removing the prostate, typically around surgery. And the summary: despite no clinical evidence, discontinuation is recommended before radical prostatectomy. And that's the recommendation. Before you get your prostate removed, stop the omega-3s. We found no clinical significant effect of omega-3 versus placebo on perioperative bleeding, laboratory tests, or postoperative complications. Our results suggest that omega-3 supplements can be taken safely before radical prostatectomy without increasing bleeding risk. These findings are relevant since omega-3s may beneficially affect prostate cancer evolution. Why does this matter? Because the whole reason you got your prostate removed is because of prostate cancer, and omega-3s can lower or slow the risk of prostate cancer growth.
Look at that.
Yeah, doctor didn't tell you this. So several other studies found no significant increase in bleeding complications during cardiac, abdominal carcinomas, and spinal decompression surgery. A narrative review of 18 studies where omega-3s were provided to a patient who underwent vascular surgery or femoral artery puncture, and concluded that in all those studies, the risk for clinically significant bleeding was virtually non-existent. Virtually non-existent. Researchers don't say things like that unless that's something they can really back up.
Absolutely.
Benefits of triglyceride lowering with omega-3 fatty acids more than outweighs the theoretical risk for bleeding. Jumping down to the discussion, our results suggest that omega-3 supplements can be safely taken before removing the prostate without increased risk of surgical bleeding or postoperative complications. And then a few studies discussing theoretical bleeding risk associated with omega-3 intake advised discontinuation before surgery without clear evidence to support this practice. So again, this is another study. This was published in the Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and then somebody else, and this was published in, let's pull up the year. It is 2022. Mm-hmm. So even in 2022, there's no clinical evidence to support this practice. Here's another surgery, omega-3s in colorectal cancer. Again, no difference in postoperative complications after surgery. And these people found, hey, there's a synergistic anti-cancer effect between EPA and 2 types of chemotherapy, which basically means if you take omega-3s with chemo, it'll actually work better. Results: no significant difference between infections and non-infectious complications. And oh, by the way, there's a non-significant decrease in hospital stay of 9 days versus 10 days, which means it wasn't statistically significant, but the patients who got the omega-3s did spend 10% less time in the hospital, or they got out 1 day sooner. So that's interesting. In a combined analysis, so this is the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, has reported that a higher intake of omega-3s after colorectal cancer diagnosis was associated with a lower risk of mortality from the disease. So after you get diagnosed with cancer, if you take omega-3s, you're going to live longer and be less likely to die. So here's the combination analysis. They show a 41% decreased risk of death. 41% decreased risk of death in those who took at least 0.3 grams of omega-3s daily. That is not a big dose, and you're going to have a 41% decrease of death. You're going to take a 70% increase of death if you increase their marine omega-3 fats by at least 0.15 grams per day compared to those who did not change their doses. Did your doctor tell you you can lower your risk by 40 to 70% after you've been diagnosed of colon cancer if you start taking omega-3s or increase your omega-3s just a little bit? 40 to 70% decreased risk of death from these fish oils. And what's even cooler, this is the part I blew me away. Omega-3 EPA was successfully incorporated into liver metastasis removed at operation, and it trends towards tumor vascularization of omega-3 treated colorectal liver metastasis was recorded. Authors reported non-significant trend towards survival. What does that mean? They gave patients omega-3s. Then when they took the tumor out of the liver in this particular study, they found the omega-3s were in the tumor, and they found those tumors with the omega-3s had reduced vascularization, meaning reduced blood flow to the tumor, which means it's growing slower or less likely to grow. So the omega-3s, by taking them, are getting into the tumor and slowing down their growth. Oh, by the way, that's pretty awesome.
That
So
is incredible.
yeah,
Wow. That's, it's one of those things where how many times has fish oil been demonized, right?
yep,
Especially in mainstream, right? Oh, fish oil doesn't do anything. Well, first of all, the fish oil was important enough for the American Heart Association actually says that that fish oil is beneficial. They actually
yep,
recommend eating a certain amount of
yep,
servings of fish every week, right?
yep,
They've even talked about fish oil supplements. It's one of the only supplements that they've actually said
yep,
provide benefits, because they're very strict on this type of stuff.
yep.
So, but the fact that I was blown away by this. It's not
Yeah.
only just that, but especially that cancer, the tumor
Yeah.
one that you said at the end. That's incredible information.
Yeah. So what does this mean as you're going into surgery? It means you should talk with your doctor about this. Because if your doctor's making this recommendation, what I tell patients is, respectfully, I tell them to have this conversation with their doctor. And I never want to contradict the advice of a surgeon if someone's going in for surgery,
Right.
but I do want to educate the patients. I do encourage them to bring some of these studies to their doctor. And if their doctor still holds a hard line, you have an option to find another surgeon. Or if you continue with that surgery, what I'll have patients do is get off. And I've never had a doctor say, don't eat fish 3 days before surgery, or a week before surgery, or a month before surgery. And what I'll tell you is, if you're going to stay off this, we know there's clear benefits, and we're proving that in these studies right here. So your job is to eat fish 3 to 4 to 5 days a week, which is what the research shows you need to get that omega-3 index up above 8. So I'll tell patients, follow your doctor's recommendations if he won't change. First thing is, we want to educate the doctor to see if he could be aware of this and change his recommendation and tell him, hey, you could actually get better outcomes if your patients took a fish oil before surgery. If the doctor doesn't want and the patient doesn't want to change surgeons, then I have them say, hey, for whatever period of time the doctor tells you to get off the omega-3 fish oils, make sure you're eating fish the equivalent of 3 to 4 to 5 times a week during that time, so you can get the same effect without contradicting doctor's orders.
Absolutely. Fantastic advice. And that's the thing. And, one of the things that I've talked about on the show many times is that, unfortunately, again, and this again, Dr. Jeff, that most doctors, they don't get trained in this stuff, right? They get very, most mainstream doctors, they get very little nutrition in medical school, and again, I think the new administration now even wants to change that, I've heard, so there's possibly good news on the horizon in terms of what's going to be taught in schools. But right now, the way it is, they don't get this stuff. And a lot of them don't, doctors like you and other doctors that know about this stuff are the ones that go outside of this, outside of their practical normal training, and actually learn it on their own, right? And that's the thing. So, obviously, again, like you said, great advice. You discuss it with your doctor and you show them the studies, you show them the information, especially prestigious. These are big studies. This is not just little stuff. These are prestigious studies that are out there. But definitely educate your doctor and work with them and say, listen, this is good information, and have them take a look at it. Hopefully if they're a doctor that's willing to take a look at this instead of not dismissing it, because some of them are just like, I don't want to even look at that stuff. Hopefully they're open-minded enough to do that. But, Dr. Jeff, I'm sure again, you have these conversations with people you're working with all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I try to do. Exactly what you're saying. I try to educate them. I try to educate the doctors. And if you'd like to educate the doctors, you can reach me through my email, or, you can find at crippenwellness.com. You can find at timelessyouthbook.com. You could find me on Instagram, Jeff Crippen, and send me a message and just put wellness talk/surgery. And I'd be happy to send you these articles that you can print out. You'll have my highlights on them. For better or worse, you can print them out, share them with your doctor, and start a conversation on is stopping omega-3s before surgery, right for you and right for your surgeon's patients. And that's what we want to find, because the decision can be made, but it should be an informed decision by you,
Yes.
and it should be an informed decision by your doctor. And what you just said, George, is because of the way medical education set up, is many doctors, nutrition's an elective or not covered at all.
That's
So
right.
your doctor may not know this because the drug rep that's coming in, that's doing their education, probably hasn't told them about the benefits of eating salmon.
Right.
So your job, you have the opportunity to fulfill that role, and I'll be happy to help you with that. Message me at either place. Just say wellness talk surgery, and I'll get you these studies, and then you can share them with your healthcare practitioner, your surgeon, and or you can also refer them to listen to this podcast. Right? Send them a copy of the link of what you just heard, and let them hear George and I discuss this, and maybe we can help improve clinical practice around omega-3s, lower the risk of bleeding, lower the risk of poor surgical outcomes, and help patients live longer, healthier lives.
Absolutely. Fantastic advice from a man who knows his stuff, Dr. Crippen. Again, it's always a pleasure and an honor to have you on this program. Thank you for educating our listeners and viewers. And everybody check him out, crippenwellness.com. Amazing information. Amazing doctor. Dr. Crippen, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you much, George. Thank you to your listeners.
Take care. All right. I want to thank you for joining me this week. As always, make sure you take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and as always, control your health. Have a great week.